Welcome to the debate. Our discussion today centers on the president's public remarks and actions following the tragic death of Charlie Kirk. Specifically, we're looking at the transcript of his press gaggle on September 11th, 2025. And this material, well, it presents a really complex picture, doesn't it? It blends expressions of, profound personal grief with some very robust political commentary and significant official decisions.
It certainly does.
So the central question we'll explore is this. Does the president's multifaceted public response, this mix of personal grief, strong political accusations, and significant official actions, does it effectively model a unified national response to tragedy and political violence? Or alternatively, does it instead risk politicizing personal loss and perhaps deepening societal divisions? My argument today will be that the president's response is, understandable, and in many ways a pragmatic approach to a very complex situation involving personal loss, political violence, and of course, national leadership. You could even argue it's an attempt to redefine national unity for our times.
In my perspective, conversely, is that while we absolutely must acknowledge the personal tragedy, the president's response, particularly those very strong political accusations and the immediate decision to confer such a high honor, it risks instrumentalizing a national tragedy for political ends. And that, I fear, could potentially inflame societal tensions rather than genuinely fostering unity.
Right. Well, from my vantage point, the president's public response to Charlie Kirk's death, as we see it in that press gaggle transcript, it truly reflects a leader grappling, I think, with a profound loss, while at the same time addressing the broader implications for the nation. His genuine personal grief and deep admiration for Charlie Kirk seem quite evident. He said, quote, "Charlie Kirk was a great person, a great man, great in every way, especially with youth." And he even admitted, "I felt so sad. Charlie was on my mind, even though the speech was initially about Charlie." I mean, this wasn't just a politician speaking. It felt like someone deeply affected, expressing a very human reaction.
Furthermore, the president explicitly called for nonviolence from his supporters. He stated he was an advocate of nonviolence. That's the way I'd like to see people respond. Now, that clearly demonstrates a commitment to peaceful conduct, even amidst all the turmoil. His strong condemnation of the, quote, radical left group of lunatics, and describing the perpetrator as an animal, total animal, well, that can be seen as a leader's firm stance against perceived threats and violence, aiming to, as he put it, get that problem solved. And the decision to award Kurt the Presidential Medal of Freedom, our highest civilian honor, signifies a decisive act. It's recognizing a figure he considered invaluable to the country and its youth, acknowledging this is a devastating moment for the country.
He emphasized his primary concern was only for the country, not his own safety, framing his entire response within that national context, protecting the nation from what he sees as internal threats.
I'm afraid I come at this from a rather different angle. While I certainly acknowledge the profound personal tragedy of Charlie Kirk's death, the president's response, as documented in that transcript, it does raise some significant concerns for me about the appropriate balance, the balance between personal grief and presidential conduct during what was, without doubt, a national moment. The immediate, and I'd say pronounced, politicization of the event, through those broad accusations against the radical left group of lunatics and the call to beat the hell out of them, well, that really risks transforming a national tragedy into just another partisan issue. And for me, that potentially hinders national unity rather than fostering it. More pointedly, the very swift decision to award Charlie Kirk the Presidential Medal of Freedom, especially when the president repeatedly emphasizes Kirk's significant role in his own election success, statements like, "He really helped me a lot," and "He was a big factor in winning youth." That could easily be perceived as, instrumentalizing a personal loss for political endorsement. And that, I believe, diminishes the nonpartisan prestige typically associated with such a high civilian honor. The use of inflammatory language, calling the shooter an animal, total animal, broadly condemning media for supposedly justifying the murder,
It might just exacerbate tensions and preclude a more measured, unifying response.
And if we look further, the president's rapid shifts in topic, like moving from condolences to discussing the construction of a new White House ballroom, well, that could suggest a rather disjointed approach to a moment that I believe required sustained gravitas.
I understand your concerns about politicization, but let's consider the president's role here, navigating grief and political commentary. I mean, in an era of heightened political tension, especially when an act of violence is perceived as politically motivated, how can a president not address both the personal sorrow and the broader political context? His strong statements against radical left lunatics, his assertion that we have to be brave in life, these are entirely consistent with his perceived duty to protect the nation from internal threats. He explicitly stated his concern was only for the country, not his personal safety. So I don't see it as simply partisan rhetoric. It's a leader articulating what he perceives as grave dangers to the nation's well-being. Perhaps it is an attempt to redefine national unity, maybe one forged in shared grievance against the perceived common enemy. Now that's controversial, sure, but it could be seen as a pragmatic approach to leadership in a deeply fractured society. He's articulating what he sees as fundamental threats.
That's a compelling argument about the leader's duty, but I'm not convinced that framing it as a sort of new kind of national unity is helpful here. While a leader certainly must address various facets of a crisis, the immediate and frankly aggressive politicization of the death, particularly with such sweeping condemnation of the radical left, I think it fundamentally undermines the possibility of a truly unifying national response. That kind of rhetoric risks deepening existing societal divides, not fostering collective grief or enabling a sober, objective investigation. When the president says, "We just have to beat the hell out of them," well, that moves beyond just identifying a threat. It seems to advocate a confrontational approach that feels inherently antithetical to national unity, especially in a moment of tragedy. And you mentioned the media earlier. Doesn't such broad condemnation of the media risk undermining trust in all information sources, even those trying to report objectively? It feels like deflection rather than addressing specific concerns.
Okay. That actually leads us directly to another critical aspect of his response, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. You've raised concerns about the timing, but I see it as a powerful and fitting tribute. From my perspective, awarding the Medal of Freedom to Charlie Kirk is a fitting, powerful tribute to a great man who had a profound impact, particularly, as the president noted, especially with youth, and contributed significantly to the president's agenda, which, he clearly believes serves the country. This act, it doesn't just honor Kirk's legacy. It also provides solace, a sense of continuity, perhaps, for his movement, which the president calls a great family. It's a potent symbol of recognition, of solidarity, a decisive gesture by a leader acknowledging someone he saw as having made an invaluable contribution, particularly in shaping young minds. It's an act of leadership, recognizing and bolstering a movement he values.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that it's purely a fitting tribute in this context. The immediate conferral of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, our higher civilian honor, right in the immediate aftermath of such a politically charged death, it raises very serious questions of appropriateness for me. The president's explicit linking of Kirk's contributions to his own election, too, his statement that nobody's stronger for me than Charlie Kirk, well, that could very easily be interpreted as a partisan reward.
You think so?
I do, and it risks compromising the non-political prestige, the historical significance that such an award is meant to embody. An honor like this should really transcend partisan politics, shouldn't it? It should be universally recognized for outstanding merit. When the president frames it so explicitly within his own political success, the timing and that political framing might just overshadow any genuine act of national recognition. It risks making it appear more like a political gesture than a purely merit-based one. And it raises a fundamental question, I think, about the enduring value of our highest civilian honors when they become so intertwined with partisan politics.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. Let's shift focus slightly to the coherence of messaging specifically regarding nonviolence versus that confrontational rhetoric. the president explicitly called for his supporters to respond with nonviolence. He directly referenced Charlie Kirk as, quote, an advocate of nonviolence. That's the way I'd like to see people respond. Now, this clear directive, delivered right in the midst of intense emotion and strong rhetoric against perpetrators or perceived adversaries, it demonstrates, I think, a nuanced approach to leadership. It shows that even while condemning the radical left lunatics, he maintained a clear message of peaceful action for his own side. This isn't necessarily a contradiction, but perhaps a delineation. Dealing with those who commit violence is one thing, guiding his followers toward peaceful means is another. It's a leader making arguably a crucial distinction in a very tense situation.
My perspective, however, highlights what I see as a significant problem with that argument. While it's true the president did call for nonviolence, that message is potentially diluted, if not outright contradicted, by other, far more aggressive statements. To suggest, almost in the same breath as calling for nonviolence, that we just have to beat the hell out of them when referring to radical left lunatics, well, that sends incredibly mixed signals, doesn't it? This kind of conflicting rhetoric could easily be interpreted by supporters as maybe tacitly encouraging confrontation while outwardly advocating for peace. It creates a really problematic ambiguity in leadership. The call for peace might just be perceived as a formality, completely overshadowed by the more forceful, combative language, and that could potentially escalate tensions rather than calming them. It leaves the listener, I think, with a very mixed message about what the appropriate response actually is.
And this brings me to my final point concerning presidential focus and the management of information. The president clearly demonstrates his awareness of the investigation's progress. He mentions that they're making big progress, noting that they have pictures and some other things, and they found the weapon. This indicates he is informed and he is concerned about justice being served. Furthermore, throughout that same gaggle, he competently navigates a really wide array of foreign policy questions, discussing complex issues like Congo, Israel's attack in Doha, Bolsonaro's conviction in Brazil, Russia's drones near Poland, meetings with Central Asian leaders. It demonstrates, I'd argue, a remarkable capacity to lead on multiple fronts, to handle diverse responsibilities, even during a moment of profound personal loss and national crisis. He's showing that the machinery of government continues to function, and he is fully engaged across the board.
I'm still not entirely convinced by that line of reasoning when it comes to presidential focus in this specific moment. While acknowledging progress in the investigation is good, the president's statement, "I have an indication, yeah, but we'll let you know about that later," well, that could be perceived as either withholding information or maybe adding an element of speculation which might not serve to calm public anxieties or foster trust. In a moment like this, clear, transparent communication about ongoing investigations seems paramount. Additionally, the president's rapid shifts in focus from the gravity of Charlie Kirk's death to, casually discussing the construction of the new ballroom for the White House or jumping to these other international issues, it could suggest a lack of sustained, singular focus on the domestic impact and the sheer solemnity of the event.
But can a president multitask?
Of course, but it's about the signaling effect, too. What does it signal about presidential focus in a crisis when such disparate topics are given seemingly similar weight in the same exchange? This fragmented attention at such a critical juncture, I worry it can diminish the sense of presidential gravitas and the perception of a leader fully dedicated to the immediate crisis at hand.
Well, we've certainly had a robust exchange today regarding the president's multifaceted response to Charlie Kirk's death. I've tried to illuminate how the president's actions could be viewed as an understandable and, in some respects, an effective demonstration of leadership blending that profound personal grief with a strong stance against perceived threats and a decisive act of honor. This approach, though perhaps robust, aims to address the various dimensions of a truly complex situation and arguably maybe even redefine how a leader approaches national unity in a highly polarized environment.
And conversely, I've highlighted how this very approach risks, in my view, instrumentalizing a tragedy through those broad accusations, potentially inflammatory language, and the rapid deployment of a high honor that might be perceived as too closely tied to political loyalty.
My concern remains that this path risks deepening societal divides precisely when national unity is most needed. This discussion really underscores the inherent, immense challenge any head of state faces in public communication during moments of profound national impact and personal loss. The material clearly reveals a leader navigating the intense demands of personal grief, political reality, and the need for national leadership, all simultaneously. Ultimately, the listener is left to weigh these perspectives, consider how leaders effectively balance these competing demands.
And there is clearly much more to explore within this rich material concerning the nature of presidential rhetoric in times of crisis, and indeed how we as a nation respond to such profound events.